Welcome to tonight's story. In this video, we'll learn about the rise of Fortnite Chapter 1, season by season, as the game transformed into a worldwide phenomenon. From meteors in the sky to the black hole that swallowed the island, this is the saga of Fortnite's first chapter. Drop a like before you fall asleep, and let's begin our journey. The island was plain, almost awkward in its simplicity. Rolling hills, scattered forests, a few small towns stitched together across a green expanse. There was no desert, no snow, no frozen towers piercing the horizon, just a humble, unassuming map with names that meant nothing yet. Retail Row, Pleasant Park, Dusty Depot. Places that would become legends, but in those first weeks they were just anonymous stops on a bus that flew across the sky. The battle bus itself was strange enough. Suspended from a hot air balloon, it hummed across the island, dropping 100 strangers into an experiment no one quite understood. There were no instructions, no tutorials, just a map and the will to survive. Players leapt out with reckless curiosity, learning as they went. Some built walls instinctively, others hoarded weapons, most just ran in circles until someone found them first. It was chaos, and yet it was magic. The storm closed in like a curtain, forcing people together, driving conflict in ways no shooter had before. Victory Royale wasn't just a win, it was a discovery, proof that you could outlast 99 others in a game that no one had mastered yet. At first, Fortnite was underestimated. In a world already dominated by PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, many dismissed Epic's cartoonish take on Battle Royale. The graphics looked playful, the mechanics, especially the building, felt absurd. Why would anyone want to fight inside a giant wooden ramp? Skeptics asked. And yet, that ramp became the answer to every duel, the lifeline for every player who refused to be shot out in the open. Slowly, the culture began to form. On Twitch, a handful of names, Ninja, Myth, Dialupo, started turning Fortnite into a spectacle. Every build battle felt like a high-wire act. Every improbable shotgun flick was clipped and replayed. And just as important as the victories were the failures, players fumbling with controls, panicking as they tried to place a wall, falling to their deaths after forgetting to build a floor. The community embraced the absurdity. Memes sprouted overnight. The double-pump shotgun exploit became a rallying cry for those who wanted to master the game's quirks. Bush campers, players who would crouch in shrubbery for entire matches, were mocked, but also secretly admired for their commitment. And then there were the noobs, a term of both endearment and ridicule. Everyone was one at some point, running across the map with a pickaxe, unaware that someone was watching from a nearby hill. Despite the early chaos, something undeniable was happening. Each day, more people logged on. Each night, more streams went live. Clips spread like wildfire on YouTube and Twitter, and word of mouth carried Fortnite beyond the core gamer crowd. It wasn't just another shooter, it was fast, funny, unpredictable. A playground as much as a battlefield. In hindsight, the island of Season 1 feels primitive, but for those who dropped in during late 2017, it was the dawn of something larger than anyone could imagine. Fortnite wasn't just another entry in the Battle Royale craze. It was about to become a cultural force, and everyone who hit Ready Up was part of the beginning. Every night, Twitch lit up with Fortnite streams. The names were small at first: Ninja, Myth, Dakotas, Summit 1G. But as the weeks went on, they grew into celebrities. Viewers didn't just tune in for gameplay, they came for personalities, for reactions, for the electricity of watching someone survive the storm with a single clutch shotgun blast. Entire communities sprouted around these streams, bound together by laughter, awe, and the thrill of a shared win. On YouTube, the game took on a different life. Conspiracy videos about secret map changes, montages of improbable headshots, and compilations of hilarious fails flooded feeds. Fortnite wasn't just content to play, it was content to consume. Fans watched it even when they weren't playing, keeping the conversation alive around the clock. Memes spread like wildfire, stitching the community together. Everyone laughed at the double-pump shotgun exploit, 2 pumps swapped in rapid rhythm, unleashing absurd bursts of damage. Skill or cheese, people argued, but either way it became a defining feature of early Fortnite. Bush campers became another inside joke, players crouched in foliage for minutes at a time, terrified of being spotted. Screenshots of Bush victories went viral, half mocking, half applauding the absurd tactic. Then came the idea of noobs. At first, it was a label for the clueless, players who swung pickaxes in panic, built single walls in the middle of open fields, or accidentally eliminated themselves with rockets. But in time, noob became something gentler, even nostalgic. Everyone remembered their first clumsy drops, their first panic builds. Being a noob wasn't shameful, it was a rite of passage. And yet, skepticism still lingered beyond the community. Critics dismissed Fortnite as a kiddie version of PUBG, doubting it could sustain its meteoric rise. But inside the game, the energy told a different story. Each night, more friends logged on together. Each week, more inside jokes were created. Each streamer found bigger audiences. Fortnite wasn't just growing, it was evolving into a culture. By the end of Season 1, players weren't just fighting for victory royals. They were building friendships, communities, and identities. Fortnite had given them a new kind of stage, and the world was just beginning to notice. By the time Season 2 arrived in December 2017, Fortnite had already proven it wasn't just a passing fad. Players were hooked on the chaos of Battle Royale, the thrill of winning against 99 others, the culture of clips and memes. But Fortnite still felt like an experiment, raw, unpolished, without a clear identity. That changed when the medieval banners were raised. For the first time, Fortnite gave itself a theme: knights, castles, and legends. The Season 2 Battle Pass, an entirely new idea in gaming at the time, introduced armor-clad heroes like the Black Knight and Blue Squire. Suddenly, the cartoony battlefield of shark guns and ramps had a mythic undertone. Players weren't just survivors anymore, they were warriors, champions of a growing saga. The impact was immediate. When you dropped into the island, you began to notice something different. Sure, the map hadn't yet undergone the massive transformations that would later define Fortnite's evolution, but the feeling had shifted. Loading screens, skins, and even emotes carried a sense of story. For the first time, the island wasn't just a playground, it was a stage for something larger. Players wore their new armor proudly. Owning the Black Knight skin became a badge of honor, proof that you had been there from the early days and committed yourself to the grind of the Battle Pass. Matches were filled with contrasts, noobs running around in default skins while looming knights towered above them, turning every encounter into a clash of eras. The psychology of cosmetics, identity, status, belonging had taken root. Outside the game, the community buzzed with excitement and speculation. What's next? Players asked on forums and streams. If Fortnite could pull off knights, what other worlds could it bring to life? For the first time, Fortnite wasn't just keeping up with trends. It was setting them. The decision to give the game a medieval identity in Season 2 seemed small, but it changed everything. It showed that Fortnite wasn't content to be just another battle royale. It would reinvent itself, season by season, carrying players along for the ride. Streamers fed into the hype. Ninja, now rapidly rising in popularity, showed off Black Knight in matches, cementing it as the ultimate flex. Myth became known not just for his building skills but for the knightly aesthetic that seemed to fit his measured, tactical style. Communities on Reddit and Twitter debated which skin was best, which cosmetics signaled true skill. Memes poked fun at squires getting eliminated instantly, or knights falling in ridiculous ways. And beneath the humor, something deeper was happening. Fortnite was crafting its first identity, a bridge between chaotic survival and epic storytelling. It was no longer just about the mechanics of shooting and building. It was about immersion, roleplay, and belonging to something bigger than yourself. The island still looked simple, still mostly unchanged. But in the minds of players, Fortnite had expanded into a world of legends. It was no longer just about being the last one standing. It was about who you were when you stood there. The idea seemed simple at first. Pay a modest fee, play the game, and unlock cosmetics as you go. No loot boxes, no random dice rolls, just a clear path of rewards tied to the hours you spent surviving the storm. But when Fortnite introduced the Battle Pass in Season 2, it didn't just give players a new way to earn gear. It reshaped the culture of gaming. The Battle Pass was revolutionary because it turned effort into identity. With every tier you unlocked, you weren't just collecting skins or emotes, you were proving something. The grind itself became a badge of honor. If you saw someone wearing the Rust Lord, you knew they had put in the time. If you spotted a Black Knight looming across the field, you didn't just see an enemy, you saw months of dedication, a player who had fought through the season to claim one of the rarest prizes. Suddenly, Fortnite wasn't just about winning matches. It was about progression. Even if you didn't secure a victory royal, every elimination, every survival minute, every completed challenge brought you closer to the next reward. The game rewarded participation, not just dominance, and that opened the door to a much larger audience. Casual players, who might have been discouraged by the sheer difficulty of being the last person alive, now had reasons to log in night after night. The community exploded with new conversations. What tier are you at became just as important as how many wins do you have. Forums filled with tips for leveling faster, YouTubers published guides on efficient challenge grinding, and friendships formed around completing objectives together. Players weren't just sharing victories, they were sharing the journey. But with the excitement came debate. Some players grumbled that the Battle Pass created a sense of FOMO, fear of missing out. If you didn't play enough during the season, you'd never unlock certain cosmetics again. The Black Knight would remain forever locked away, a prize only for the dedicated. To some, this felt unfair, to others, it made the items even more valuable. Cosmetics became trophies, relics of a season gone by. Streamers and influencers amplified the craze. Ninja flexed the latest skins on his streams, making them instantly desirable. Myth showcased emotes after every victory, turning dances like the Worm and Ride the Pony into iconic Fortnite rituals. Emotes spread beyond the game, kids copied them in schools, athletes performed them on fields, and suddenly Fortnite wasn't just part of gaming culture, it was shaping global culture. In just a few months, Fortnite had transformed the idea of player expression. No longer were you just another anonymous soldier in a fight to the death. You were a knight, a rogue, a legend of your own making. Your skin, your dance, your banner, they told your story before you even built your first wall. The Battle Pass was more than a monetization system. It was a philosophy. It gave every season a rhythm, every player a reason to return, every match a sense of progress. It ensured that Fortnite wasn't just a game you played, it was a world you lived in. By the end of Season 2, players weren't just logging on for the matches anymore. They were logging on to climb, to collect, to show who they were becoming. And in doing so, Fortnite found its secret weapon, not the shotgun, not the rocket launcher, not even the building mechanic. Its secret weapon was identity. By February 2018, Fortnite had already transformed from a scrappy experiment into the most talked about game in the world. The Battle Pass craze of Season 2 had shown players that the island wasn't static, it could evolve, grow, and take on new identities. But Season 3 brought something new, something deeper. It wasn't just about progression anymore. It was about mystery. The first hint was subtle, almost easy to miss. On a crisp night sky above the island, players looked up and noticed a strange glimmer. At first, many thought it was just a graphical detail, a pretty star meant to make the world feel alive. But it wasn't a star. It was too bright, too deliberate. And over the weeks that followed, it grew larger. It was a comet. For the first time, Fortnite hinted that the world itself was moving toward something monumental. Each day, players would crane their camera upward mid-match, ignoring firefights just to stare at the burning streak in the sky. The comet wasn't just background, it was storytelling. A looming, silent countdown that sparked whispers across the community. The forums lit up with theories. Some claimed the comet was aimed directly at Tilted Towers, the sprawling urban hotspot that had quickly become the most infamous location on the map. Tilted was divisive, players either loved its chaos or hated how it sucked the entire lobby into one city block. The idea that Epic might destroy it captured imaginations immediately. Meme after meme appeared: Tilted is doomed, say goodbye to your favorite drop, rest in peace, Tilted Towers. YouTubers dove headfirst into the speculation economy. Conspiracy videos analyzed the comet's angle, its glow, its supposed movement across the nights. Some swore they could hear strange sounds if they turned up their volume while staring at it. Others data mined the game files, uncovering clues that only fueled the frenzy. It was less about what was happening in-game, and more about what could happen. Fortnite wasn't just delivering content anymore, it was delivering suspense. Meanwhile, Season 3 itself layered in a new theme: space. The Battle Pass introduced astronauts, future tech skins, and starry backdrops. Players dressed in spacesuits roamed the island, almost as if they were prophets of the comet's coming. For many, this was when Fortnite began to feel like more than just a shooter. It was a universe. A place where grounded reality could collide with fantasy, where an island could become a stage for cosmic events. Matches during Season 3 carried a strange duality. On the ground, firefights were more intense than ever. Players experimented with new building styles, testing strategies that made Fortnite unlike any shooter before it. But above, always above, the comet lingered, a reminder that something bigger was at stake. Every victory royale was celebrated, but every player knew the real prize wasn't in loot or wins. It was in discovering what the comet would eventually do. Streamers leaned into the spectacle. Ninja, now becoming a household name, played beneath the comet's glow, often joking mid-match about Tilted's days being numbered. Myth speculated live with his audience, treating the comet like a riddle to be solved. Clips of players role-playing beneath the glowing object, building shrines to it, shooting rockets at it in futile attempts to change its course, spread across social media. Fortnite wasn't just a game people played. It was a mystery people lived inside. And that was the genius of it. Epic Games had found a way to blur the line between narrative and gameplay. The comet wasn't just lore, it was community fuel. It gave players a reason to come back, to talk, to their eyes, to bond over a shared question: what's coming next? By the end of Season 3, the island felt charged with anticipation. Victories mattered, but something larger loomed over everyone's heads, literally. For the first time in gaming history, millions of players around the world were staring at the same sky, waiting for the same celestial object to crash. It wasn't just a comet. It was the birth of Fortnite's mythology. The comet burned brighter every day, and with it the community's imagination. By now, the glowing rock in the sky wasn't just an object, it was a prophecy. Players logged in not only to fight for victory royals but to check the heavens, searching for new clues, new streaks of light, new evidence that the end was near. Fortnite had given them their first great mystery, and the community responded with unrestrained creativity. Everywhere you looked, theories flourished. Reddit threads stretched for miles, connecting dots no one else could see. The comet is going to hit Tilted Towers, one post declared, complete with diagrams showing the exact angle of descent. Another insisted it would shatter the entire map, ushering in a brand new island. Some players even claimed Epic had left hidden Morse code messages in the controller vibrations, taps and rumbles that, when decoded, spelled out ominous warnings. YouTubers turned speculation into performance. Channels with millions of subscribers posted dramatic thumbnails: a comet crashing into Tilted, flames engulfing the map, caption screaming, "Fortnite is changing forever." Viewers clicked in droves, eager for every rumor, every data-mined clue, every pixel that might reveal the future. The comet wasn't just part of the game, it was a content engine. And memes, as always, tied everything together. Players created mock goodbye letters to Tilted Towers, treating the city as though it were a beloved character about to be written off the show. Screenshots of crowded Tilted lobbies, dozens of players landing in one spot, knowing its days were numbered, circulated endlessly. Twitter buzzed with jokes. Tilted Towers survived longer than my last relationship, F for Tilted, Season 3, the end of an era. The community had already buried Tilted in spirit, even though it still stood tall. In-game, players began acting out their own comet rituals. Some built massive structures pointing skyward, launch pads meant to welcome the comet or deflect it. Others built shrines, pyramids, temples, even pixel art, dedicated to the mysterious rock. Entire squads would drop into matches with no intention of fighting, only to construct massive monuments to the looming doom above. For a game about competition, Season 3 revealed something unexpected: Fortnite could also be a place of collective storytelling. Meanwhile, the Battle Pass layered fuel onto the fire. Astronaut skins and space-themed gear seemed to confirm the cosmic narrative. Were we about to leave the island entirely? Would the comet bring aliens, or even new dimensions? Every unlock was treated like a piece of evidence, every skin like a puzzle piece in a larger riddle. Streamers amplified the mania. Ninja streams now drew tens of thousands of viewers at a time, many of whom weren't just watching for gameplay, they were listening for his take on the comet. Myth dissected new theories live with his audience, while smaller creators built entire brands around lore speculation. Fortnite had transformed into a shared campfire story, one told in real time by millions of voices. And then there was the deeper realization: Fortnite was alive. This wasn't a static game frozen in time, like so many shooters before it. The comet proved they were living inside a story that was unfolding around them. By the final weeks of Season 3, the anticipation was unbearable. Matches felt charged with tension, every fight taking place beneath a sky that promised catastrophe. Players began counting the days, convinced that something monumental was about to happen. No one knew exactly what the comet would do, but everyone knew it would change everything. For the first time, Fortnite wasn't simply a game. It was a conversation, a cultural phenomenon, a mystery box pulling millions into orbit. The comet wasn't just an object in the sky, it was the community's imagination, burning brighter every day. And soon, it would collide. By mid-Season 3, the comet had become more than a mystery, it was a mirror. Players saw in it whatever they wanted: destruction, rebirth, or a cosmic warning. Every community theory wasn't just a prediction, it was a reflection of the hopes and fears players had for Fortnite itself. The most popular prophecy was simple, almost inevitable: Tilted Towers would fall. It made sense. Tilted was the busiest, bloodiest point on the island, a magnet for every lobby. It dominated every match. To some, Tilted was too strong, an imbalance that warped the game around it. To others, it was a beloved proving ground, the ultimate test of skill. The comet became the perfect narrative weapon, an act of divine balance, sent to erase the most controversial city on the island. Memes flooded Reddit: "Comet, do your duty." But Tilted wasn't the only target. A smaller, more fringe theory suggested that the comet would obliterate the entire island. Epic would wipe the slate clean, the argument went, and replace the map with something brand new. It was a terrifying thought. Players were just beginning to form attachments to locations: retail, pleasant, dusty, and the idea of losing them all at once felt apocalyptic. Yet it carried weight. Epic had already proven it was unafraid to shake things up. Why not go further? Other theories veered into science fiction. Some believed the comet wasn't a comet at all, but a spaceship. A vessel carrying aliens, heroes, or villains that would land and change the course of the story. The astronaut skins introduced in Season 3 were seen as hints. Were these explorers from another world, or scouts preparing us for first contact? Fan art spread across Twitter, depicting alien invasions and epic battles between humans and extraterrestrial foes. And then there were the conspiracists, the lore detectives, the data miners. They scoured the files, extracted sound effects, and claimed to uncover coded messages. One of the most famous discoveries came from controller vibrations. Players swore that when standing in certain parts of the map, the rumbles followed a pattern. When translated into Morse code, they seemed to spell SOS and they're coming. Whether it was true or not didn't matter. The rumor was enough to fuel countless videos and debates. The comet also inspired foreshadowing of something greater, the Visitor. Players didn't know it yet, but in the silence of Season 3, Epic was laying the groundwork for the next chapter of Fortnite's story. Fan theories of aliens and astronauts weren't entirely wrong. They were fragments of a truth that would arrive in Season 4. The community was unknowingly writing the prologue to Fortnite's first great villain. What made this moment so powerful was that nothing was confirmed. Epic remained silent, letting the comet glow brighter while players filled the void with speculation. Every day felt like a cliffhanger, every theory a possible spoiler for an event that hadn't yet occurred. The uncertainty gave Fortnite its greatest weapon, suspense. By the final stretch of Season 3, the fanbase had split into camps. Some were doomsayers, convinced Tilted Towers was hours away from annihilation. Others were dreamers, predicting alien wars or even entirely new maps. And then there were the skeptics, rolling their eyes, certain the comet would amount to nothing. But all of them, no matter their stance, logged in and looked up at the same sky. The comet was uniting millions under one question: what happens next? Soon, the theories would end. The sky would crack. And Fortnite's first great disaster would arrive. The comet had loomed for months, glowing brighter every day, an omen written in fire across Fortnite's sky. Players had watched, speculated, and prayed, some to see Tilted Towers destroyed, others for the map to remain untouched. But when Season 4 began in May 2018, the waiting was over. The comet fell. It didn't strike Tilted. Instead, the fiery rock plummeted into the quiet heart of the island, Dusty Depot. What had once been 3 unassuming warehouses, barely anyone's favorite drop spot, was obliterated in an instant. In its place, a massive crater yawned open in the earth, smoke still rising from the impact. The depot was gone. In its place lay Dusty Divot, an otherworldly scar across the island's center. Players who dropped there on that first day of Season 4 never forgot it. The air felt alive with tension. The ground was scattered with glowing shards of strange rock, hot rocks. Consuming them sent players bounding across the battlefield in low-gravity leaps, fights turning into chaotic ballets of gunfire and weightless motion. The comet hadn't just changed the landscape, it had changed the very physics of battle. And around the crater, evidence of something more began to appear. Trucks, dig sites, scientific equipment. Dusty Divot wasn't just a hole in the ground, it was a mystery. Someone was studying the comet's remains. Someone knew it was more than just a rock. Fortnite had shifted. For the first time, there was a story. Season 4 introduced a narrative that stretched beyond cosmetics and speculation. Players discovered that the comet hadn't simply been random, it carried within it a figure known as the Visitor, a mysterious armored traveler who would soon set events in motion that reshaped the island forever. But before the Visitor, there was a different stage to play out. Season 4 wrapped itself in the aesthetics of a superhero movie. The battle pass was filled with costume champions and villains, Carbide, Omega, Vela, and more. Loading screens depicted battles between light and dark, hinting at an epic showdown brewing on the island. It was as if Fortnite had transformed into a blockbuster film, one that every player participated in simply by dropping from the bus. Matches became theatrical. Players dressed as Carbide and Omega would square off in duels, role-playing their own superhero sagas. Squads would gather in Divot to fight over hot rocks, their movement so chaotic it felt like watching a superpowered brawl. Every firefight carried a cinematic flair, every emote felt like a victory pose after the credits rolled. Fortnite wasn't just delivering gameplay, it was delivering spectacle. Outside the game, the community exploded with awe. Clips of players leaping with hot rocks filled YouTube and Twitch, with streamers turning every encounter into a stunt show. Memes celebrated Dusty's destruction, while others mourned the humble depot that had vanished overnight. RIP Dusty Depot became a rallying cry, the first time players realized Fortnite could erase the places they loved. It gave every corner of the island a new sense of fragility. Nothing was safe. Everything could change. And beneath the excitement, curiosity bubbled. Who was the visitor? Why was he here? What was the purpose of the comet? Theories once again flooded forums, but this time the mystery wasn't in the sky, it was already on the island, waiting to be uncovered. Season 4 marked the moment Fortnite truly stepped into the realm of living narrative. It wasn't just a game with updates. It was a saga unfolding in real time, with players not as passive viewers but as participants inside the story. Dusty Divot wasn't just a new point of interest, it was proof that the island was alive, mutable, and full of secrets yet to come. The comet had struck, the crater had opened, and the story of Fortnite had begun. The comet had fallen, Dusty Depot was gone, and Fortnite was no longer the same game it had been a season earlier. Players were used to patches, balance changes, new weapons. But what Season 4 delivered was something entirely new, storytelling inside the game itself. At first, the signs were subtle. Each week, the island shifted, not in massive, world-ending ways, but in small, deliberate steps. Construction crews appeared at Dusty Divot, slowly turning the crater into a research facility. Mysterious bunkers and machines were set up around the comet's impact site. The sense was clear, Epic wasn't just dropping content into the game anymore. They were building a narrative brick by brick, in real time, and players were living inside it. Then came the superheroes. Carbide, Omega, Vela, they weren't just skins. They were characters. The Battle Pass loading screens told fragments of their story, a movie set, a clash between good and evil, a showdown that felt both staged and strangely real. Players debated endlessly, were these heroes actual inhabitants of the Fortnite world, or just actors in a film? Was the visitor part of their story, or something bigger altogether? The uncertainty was intoxicating. For the first time, Fortnite blurred the line between lore and gameplay. It was no longer just about winning matches, it was about uncovering what the island was trying to say. And then, something extraordinary happened, the first in-game event. One day, players looked to the sky and saw a rocket poised on a launch pad. It didn't appear in a trailer, or in patch notes, it was simply there, in the world, waiting. And when the moment finally came, when the countdown hit 0, every player who was online was treated to something never seen before, a live, one-time event. The rocket launched, roaring across the island's sky. Trails of fire split the heavens as players stood in awe, weapons lowered, forgetting the battle entirely. For a few minutes, Fortnite wasn't a competition, it was a collective experience. Millions watched as the rocket fractured the sky, tearing open a rift in reality itself. The map wasn't just changing, it was alive, responsive, and dramatic. The community erupted. Clips of the rocket launch flooded YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter, replayed endlessly as players who missed it begged for re-uploads. Fans debated what it meant. Was the visitor responsible? Was the rift a doorway to another world? Had Fortnite just broken its own reality? Theories spread faster than the rocket itself, and suddenly the entire player base felt like they were part of a sci-fi epic. This was the moment Fortnite stopped being just a battle royale. It was now a cultural stage. Events weren't confined to cutscenes or trailers, they happened inside the game, in real time, with players as witnesses. The rocket launch was proof that Fortnite wasn't just delivering updates, it was telling a story that unfolded live, unrepeatable, unforgettable. The excitement spilled beyond the game. Articles in mainstream media covered the rocket event as if it were a sporting final. Streamers broke viewer records as audiences tuned in just to watch the sky tear apart. Fortnite had discovered a new kind of magic, the power of the shared moment. From that day on, players knew nothing on the island was permanent. Dusty Depot was gone. The comet had brought the visitor. The rocket had fractured the sky. Every season could bring another surprise, another event that would only happen once, another story you had to witness to believe. Season 4 wasn't just the start of lore, it was the beginning of Fortnite's most powerful tradition, the live event. And the community, hooked and hungry for more, would never look at the island the same way again. By the summer of 2018, Fortnite was no longer just a game. It had become a worldwide phenomenon. What started in late 2017 as a colorful experiment, an almost cartoonish alternative to PUBG, had exploded into something much larger. Within less than a year, Fortnite had gone from niche curiosity to cultural centerpiece. It wasn't just being played, it was being lived. The numbers told part of the story. Tens of millions of players had joined by the end of Season 2, but after the comet and the rocket launch of Season 4, the player base skyrocketed past 125 million worldwide. That figure wasn't confined to hardcore gamers, it included children on playgrounds, teenagers huddled around consoles after school, parents sneaking in matches late at night. Fortnite had captured everyone. But the numbers alone didn't explain the phenomenon. It was the culture. Fortnite had become a household name, not through traditional advertising, but through sheer visibility. Twitch streams broke records, with Ninja playing alongside celebrities like Drake, Travis Scott, and Juju Smith-Schuster in a crossover moment that dominated headlines. YouTube was saturated with Fortnite content, tutorials, memes, conspiracy theories, montages of improbable sniper shots. Social media overflowed with clips of dances and skins, many of them leaping from the game into real life. The island itself had grown into something no other game had achieved, a shared stage. The comet had proven Fortnite wasn't static, the rocket launch had proven it could tell stories in real time. And the player base responded in kind. Shrines were built, rituals were enacted, memes spread like wildfire. The community didn't just play on the island, they interpreted it, celebrated it, and even mourned its changes. For many players, Fortnite became a second home. You didn't log on just to win matches. You logged on to see what was new, to witness what had changed, to share laughs and losses with friends. The Battle Royale format gave the game its structure, but the culture gave it its soul. And perhaps most importantly, Fortnite had redefined what a video game could be. It wasn't just entertainment, it was a live experience. One week the sky could hold a comet, the next it could split open with a rift. Epic Games had proven they could make the world feel unpredictable, alive, and worth returning to. By the end of Season 4, Fortnite wasn't simply competing in the Battle Royale space, it had transcended it. The game was everywhere. In classrooms, in music, in sports celebrations, in late-night television. It was no longer just a shooter with building mechanics. It was a cultural touchstone, a shared language spoken by millions across the globe. The island had awakened. The question now wasn't whether Fortnite would endure, it was how far it could go. And in Season 5, the Rifts would answer that question with a resounding truth: the island story was only just beginning. The rocket had broken the sky. Its trail still hung in memory, fiery arcs, a near crash into Tilted, and finally the blinding crack that tore the heavens open. And when the light faded, it left behind something no one could explain, a rift. It hovered in the sky like a scar, a jagged wound in reality itself. At first, players weren't sure what it was. Just another visual effect? A tease? But as the days passed, the rift grew. It pulsed. It hummed. It reached. And then, reality began to unravel. Objects vanished from the island, ripped away by invisible hands. A motel sign blinked out of existence. An anchor appeared in the grass, alien and rusted. A giant wooden carriage materialized on a hill. It was as though history itself was bleeding into the game, time and space collapsing in on one another. Fortnite, once just a battlefield, had become a collision point of worlds. When Season 5 launched, the rift's impact was undeniable. Entire regions of the island had changed overnight. The western edge was consumed by a desert biome, its dunes and canyons a shocking contrast to the island's green heart. In the north, a Viking village stood proudly on a mountaintop, complete with a longship frozen in ice. Across the island, relics from other times and places were scattered like breadcrumbs, statues, ancient carts, strange rooms. It felt as though Fortnite had outgrown its own borders. No longer confined to one setting, the island now drew from all of history, all of mythology, all of imagination. The rift wasn't just a crack in the sky, it was a portal, and anything could come through. Players felt the shift immediately. Every drop felt like stepping into a new world. One match you could be battling through a desert canyon, the next, storming a Viking hall. Fortnite had never been so diverse, so unpredictable. And with unpredictability came possibility. If a Viking village could appear, what was next? Dinosaurs? Aliens? Theories once again flooded the community, but this time the speculation was boundless. The rift could bring anything. Outside the game, the cultural frenzy reached new heights. YouTubers treated the rift like a mystery box, every strange object that appeared became a video, every patch note dissected for hidden meaning. Streamers roleplayed as Vikings, as desert bandits, as explorers in a fractured world. Fan art surged. Tilted towers half destroyed by pyramids, Loot Lake replaced with oceans of lava, rifts opening into the real world. Fortnite wasn't just a game anymore, it was a mythology, and the players were the scribes. And perhaps most importantly, Season 5 proved that Fortnite could reach beyond itself. The rift blurred the boundary between the island and the outside world. In fact, Epic took it literally. Real-world llamas began appearing in cities like Paris, London, and Barcelona, life imitating the rift, Fortnite spilling into reality. The game had become a cultural crossover event, not just on screens but in the streets. Inside the island, though, the tone had shifted. The comet had been a warning, the rocket a spark. But the rift was something greater, a gateway. It whispered that Fortnite was not confined to one place, one time, or even one set of rules. The island was alive, and its future was infinite. The storm still closed in, and victory royals still crowned survivors. But something had changed. When you looked to the sky and saw that jagged, glowing tear, you weren't just playing a match. You were staring into the unknown. Season 5 wasn't just a new start. It was a declaration, anything can happen here. The rift was more than a crack in the sky, it was a mirror of Fortnite itself. For the first time, players realized that the island wasn't a stable home. It was fragile, mutable, a stage where anything could appear or vanish in an instant. At first, the community treated the rift with the same curiosity they had shown the comet months earlier. Screenshots flooded Reddit, players building staircases to the heavens just to reach it, only to be swallowed by the storm. Some squads dropped into matches with no intention of fighting, instead gathering materials to construct monuments beneath the glowing fracture. Others fired rockets endlessly at the sky, as though they could push the rift back, close it before it grew too large. But unlike the comet, which promised destruction, the rift promised possibility. Theories spread like wildfire. Some players believed the rift was a doorway to alternate timelines. Others insisted it was pulling the island apart, brick by brick, rewriting history before their eyes. A popular theory claimed the rift was a cycle. Every season would bend the island further until it collapsed completely. For many, this was thrilling. Fortnite wasn't just evolving anymore. It was rewriting reality. And Epic only stoked the fire. The strange objects appearing on the island, anchors, stagecoaches, statues, felt like breadcrumbs left. YouTubers built entire careers out of analyzing these anomalies, slowing footage frame by frame, weaving conspiracy theories with all the seriousness of detectives. For the first time, Fortnite players realized they weren't just witnesses. They were participants in a shared narrative, their speculation and creativity shaping how the game was understood. Epic didn't explain everything, they let the rift speak for itself, knowing the community would fill in the gaps with their own myths. And foreshadowing hung heavy in the air. The desert biome, the Viking village, the random artifacts scattered across the map, none of them felt final. They felt like warnings. The rift had shown it could bring in pieces of other worlds, other realities. If it could pull objects, what was stopping it from pulling people? Or creatures? Or entire universes? The rift made Fortnite feel infinite. No longer bound by one island, one theme, or one set of rules, the game had become a canvas for whatever Epic and the community could imagine. It was exhilarating, but also unsettling. Because if the rift could bring anything into the island, it could also take anything away. By the time the community settled into Season 5, one truth was clear: the island was no longer just a battlefield. It was a crossroads. A fracture in space and time. A place where worlds collided. And the players were living inside the fracture. The rift in the sky didn't just change the island, it changed the players. By Season 5, Fortnite had become something far greater than a competitive shooter. It was now a shared mythos, and the community became its storytellers. From the first days of the season, social media overflowed with creativity. Players built elaborate theories about the desert biome, the Viking village, and the ancient relics scattered across the island. YouTubers stitched together timelines, insisting that the rift had collapsed centuries into seconds, pulling fragments of history into the present. Some fan-made maps imagined what would come next: pyramids rising from the sand, dinosaurs roaming the forests, entire castles floating above the storm. On Reddit and Twitter, fan art exploded. Sketches of the visitor standing against the glow of the rift, Vikings clashing with futuristic soldiers, and even satirical drawings of tilted towers narrowly avoiding destruction, again, circulated widely. Some fans wrote entire fanfics, treating Fortnite like an epic saga where warriors from different eras were forced to fight on the same cursed island. For many, the rift wasn't just an event, it was a story prompt. Streamers leaned into the mythology, too. Myth roleplayed as a guardian of the rift, speaking in mock-serious tones as he fought off opponents beneath its glow. Ninja cracked jokes that the rift was watching him, turning every moment into a blend of gameplay and performance art. Smaller creators built entire channels around lore speculation, their videos framed like investigative reports, uncovering the truth about Fortnite's fractured reality. But alongside the serious theories, the humor of the community kept things alive. Memes about llamas being sucked through rifts into the real world went viral, especially after Epic placed actual Fortnite llamas in European cities as part of their marketing. Players joked about dropping into matches only to find George Washington or a T-Rex waiting with a pump shotgun. Fortnite had become a canvas for both awe and absurdity, a place where every possibility was fair game. Most importantly, the community began to understand that Fortnite was no longer just a game to play, it was a platform for participation. Players weren't just consuming content from Epic, they were shaping the culture themselves. Every meme, every fan theory, every video added to the living mythology of the island. Epic seemed to recognize this, often leaving clues vague enough to encourage speculation, almost as if they were handing the pen to the fans. This was the turning point. The comet of Season 3 had introduced mystery. The rocket of Season 4 had introduced events. But the rift of Season 5 introduced something larger, mythology created by both Epic and the players together. It was a collaborative story, written not just by the developers but by millions of people across the world. The island was no longer static ground. It was a crossroads of imagination. And in the hands of the community, it became limitless. By the end of Season 5, it was clear that Fortnite wasn't only redefining games. It was redefining culture itself. The sky had torn open, history had spilled onto the island, and rifts had rewritten reality itself. But just when players thought they had seen it all, the rifts closed with one final gift. It appeared suddenly, without warning. On a hot August day in 2018, lightning cracked from the fading rift over the desert. The storm roared, the ground shook, and then, out of thin air, it materialized, a massive, glowing, purple cube. The island had never seen anything like it. Towering over players, humming with strange energy, it radiated mystery. Some tried to shoot it, only to be flung back by a shockwave. Others discovered that standing near it granted a shield, as though the cube itself were alive and aware. Slowly, tentatively, the community gave it a name. Not the cube. Not the object. Just Kevin. Kevin wasn't static. He rolled. Every few days, the cube would rumble, lift itself, and rotate, crushing trees and buildings in its path. Each movement sparked chaos. Where was it going? What was it trying to do? Some players followed it religiously, dedicating entire matches just to chase its journey. Squads built staircases and watchtowers to observe it like pilgrims shadowing a god. The cube left behind strange runes, etched into the ground with glowing energy. These marks weren't decorative, they warped gravity, creating zones where players could leap and float in surreal combat. Matches suddenly carried new dynamics. A simple shotgun fight could turn into an anti-gravity duel as both players bounced unpredictably across the glowing fields. The cube wasn't just scenery. It was rewriting the rules of play. And as Kevin continued his crawl across the island, anticipation grew. Everyone wanted to know, where was it going? Communities formed around the mystery. Reddit threads charted Kevin's path like meteorologists tracking a storm, predicting his next stop with maps and calculations. YouTubers live-streamed its every movement, tens of thousands tuning in to watch the cube tilt and roll a few feet forward. Memes spread like wildfire. All hail Kevin, protect Kevin, Kevin is love, Kevin is life. What had started as a cosmic anomaly became Fortnite's first true character. The journey climaxed at Loot Lake. As Kevin reached the water's edge, players gathered to watch. And then, with no hesitation, the cube rolled in. Instead of sinking, it dissolved into the water, transforming the once still lake into a glowing, bouncy surface. Players leapt across it in disbelief, laughing at the absurdity. Loot Lake, long considered one of the dullest spots on the map, had become a trampoline of chaos overnight. Season 6 had begun with a medieval castle floating above the map, carried by Kevin's energy. The cube lifted an entire section of Loot Lake into the sky, turning it into a massive floating island. Matches were now fought across swirling whirlwinds and crumbling cliffs, battles raging both above and below the hovering landmass. It was breathtaking, bizarre, and uniquely Fortnite. Kevin wasn't just an object anymore, he was a force. A wandering enigma. A villain to some, a hero to others, but undeniably alive in the minds of players. For the first time, the island itself felt like it had a beating heart, a pulse carried in the cube's hum. The community was entranced. Kevin wasn't controlled by players, but he felt like part of them. He was unpredictable, unknowable, but somehow beloved. No patch note, no trailer, no cinematic could replicate the sheer awe of logging in and watching the cube roll a little further, a little closer to its destiny. The island had seen a comet and a rocket. But Kevin was different. Kevin was personal. Kevin was ours. And as Season 6 unfolded, everyone understood the Cube's story wasn't over. By the time Kevin rolled across the island in Season 6, Fortnite was no longer just the most popular game in the world. It had become a global phenomenon that reached far beyond the boundaries of gaming itself. In less than a year, Fortnite had gone from an experimental spin-off to a cultural superpower. By late 2018, its player base had surged past 200 million registered players worldwide. At any given moment, tens of millions were dropping from the battle bus, building towers, chasing victory royals, and now, worshipping the Cube. Fortnite wasn't simply a game people played, it was a shared experience people belonged to. The Battle Pass had become a cultural engine. Every season introduced new skins, emotes, and back bling that set the tone not just for the game, but for pop culture at large. Season 6 brought some of Fortnite's most memorable looks: the eerie Calamity, a gunslinger who became iconic for her place in Fortnite memes, the menacing Dire, a skin that transformed players into a werewolf as they leveled it up, and fan favorites like Skull Trooper making triumphant returns, cementing themselves as staples of Halloween. Owning certain skins was more than cosmetics, it was a status symbol. Being seen in a lobby with Black Knight, Renegade Raider, or Skull Trooper marked you as a veteran, a part of Fortnite's earliest chapters. And emotes? They had become an empire of their own. What began as playful dances inside the game had crossed into the real world with unstoppable momentum. From the floss to Orange Justice, Fortnite's dances showed up everywhere, in classrooms, at birthday parties, on NFL end zones, and even on stage at concerts. The line between digital and physical had dissolved. Kids weren't just playing Fortnite, they were performing it. Fortnite's rise was fueled not only by its content but by its community. Streamers like Ninja, Myth, Tfue, and Pokimane had become celebrities, drawing millions of viewers on Twitch and YouTube. Fortnite wasn't just something you played after school, it was something you watched before bed, something you discussed at lunch, something you quoted and memed endlessly. And with Epic's decision to keep the game free to play, Fortnite felt accessible to everyone, no matter their background. But perhaps the clearest sign of Fortnite's dominance was how it reached into places no other game had touched. Musicians performed emotes on stage. Athletes mimicked dances after scoring. Celebrities dropped into matches with streamers, creating internet-breaking moments. The game was a cultural equalizer. Kids, teens, adults, and celebrities all shared the same stage on the island. By Season 6, Fortnite was more than the sum of its mechanics. It was a global stage, a blend of gaming, entertainment, and culture. Skins were no longer just cosmetics, they were digital fashion, expressions of identity. Live events weren't just updates, they were spectacles rivaling blockbuster films. And Fortnite wasn't just competing with other games anymore, it was competing with everything. Television, movies, sports, music. Kevin the Cube was rolling across the island, the story was deepening, but the true story was bigger than that. Fortnite had conquered the world. By the end of Season 6, Kevin's journey had become more than a spectacle. He had rolled across the island, carved runes into the ground, transformed Loot Lake into a trampoline, and lifted a piece of it into the skies. The Cube was unpredictable, mysterious, and alive. Players followed him like pilgrims, joking, theorizing, and building shrines in his path. But no one could have predicted how it would end. On a quiet November afternoon in 2018, the Cube reached its breaking point. It began at Loot Lake. The floating island trembled, its foundations glowing brighter and brighter as Kevin pulsed with unstable energy. Players dropped in to watch, unsure whether this was another step in his journey or the final chapter. Then, suddenly, the Cube cracked. And the island erupted. A brilliant light consumed the map, and in an instant, every player in the match was pulled into the void. Weapons vanished. Buildings stopped. There was no storm, no fighting, just a blinding, endless white space. For the first time in Fortnite's history, there were no teams, no goals, no survival. Players were weightless figures adrift in a dimension beyond the island. It was silent. Then, softly, something fluttered. From the nothingness emerged a glowing butterfly, delicate and radiant, wings shimmering with impossible colors. It drifted through the void, weaving around the players. And then, one by one, it landed on their hands. For a fleeting moment, every player was connected to the same vision, a living symbol of change, of transition, of rebirth. And then, just as suddenly, the butterfly dissolved into light. The void collapsed. Players found themselves back on the island, standing around Loot Lake. But it was transformed. The cube was gone, its energy spent, replaced by a serene field of crystalline blossoms. The chaotic trampoline of liquid had given way to stillness and beauty. The battle royal resumed as if nothing had happened, but nothing would ever be the same. The community exploded with awe. Twitter and Reddit lit up with clips of the event, players screaming in disbelief as they were pulled into the void. Streamers went silent, their usual chatter replaced by stunned gasps. For a few minutes, Fortnite had transcended gaming itself. It wasn't a competition anymore, it was art. This was the first time players felt Fortnite wasn't just telling them a story, but bringing them into it. They hadn't watched a cutscene. They had been there, inside it, touching the butterfly themselves. Every player shared the same memory, the same surreal silence, the same moment of wonder. And those who weren't logged in scrambled to watch recordings, knowing they had missed something unrepeatable. Epic had achieved something unprecedented, a global, one-time-only event that turned millions of gamers into witnesses of the same living story. No trailer, no update, no patch could replicate it. You had to be there. And with the Butterfly event, Fortnite had proven once again that it was more than a game. It was a stage for the extraordinary. A place where the impossible could happen. A story you didn't just watch, you lived. The cube was gone, but its legacy was eternal. Kevin had taught the world that Fortnite wasn't just rewriting gaming mechanics. It was rewriting what gaming could be. The cube was gone. The butterfly had faded into memory. The island seemed calm, peaceful even, with its crystalline blossoms at Loot Lake standing as a monument to Kevin's mysterious end. But in Fortnite, peace never lasted long. Season 7 arrived in December 2018 like a storm, and it quite literally was one. It began with a shadow on the horizon. Off the coast of the island, an iceberg loomed, its jagged cliffs piercing the sea. As the days passed, it drew closer, until the island itself trembled from the collision. A new landmass appeared, jutting from the ocean's edge, blanketed in snow and ice. The biome was unlike anything players had seen before. Snow draped across frozen peaks and valleys, icy caverns carved into the cliffs, new towns dotting the tundra. Planes, yes, planes, now roared across the skies in the form of the X for Stormwing, adding a new dimension to battles. For the first time, combat wasn't just on the ground or in the builds. It was aerial, chaotic, cinematic. But the greatest change wasn't in the snow itself. It was in the Ice King. A towering armored figure, cloaked in blue and crowned with jagged frost, emerged as the season's central icon. He wasn't just another Battle Pass skin, he was a looming presence, a villain straight out of myth, a king of winter descending upon the island. And, as with every Fortnite season, the community sensed that his arrival meant more than cosmetics. Players noticed strange runes carved into the ice, foreboding castles perched on frozen mountains, and the spreading chill that seemed to hint at something darker. The Ice King wasn't content to sit quietly on his throne, he was preparing something. That something arrived in January. On one fateful day, the entire island gathered for another live event. In the center of the snowy biome, the Ice King appeared in colossal form, towering above the map like a god. Wielding a shard of ice as his weapon, he summoned a storm unlike any seen before. Players watched in awe as his power spread outward, waves of frost engulfing the island until everything was buried in snow. The event was breathtaking in scale. For the first time, the entire map had been transformed live before players' eyes, not in patch notes, not in trailers, but in the middle of their game. Forests became tundras. Plains turned to frozen wastelands. The island had been conquered, wrapped in the Ice King's eternal winter. But all quickly gave way to controversy. Alongside the snow came the return of zombies, icebound creatures that spawned across the island, attacking players mid-match. Some loved the added chaos, the thrill of fending off hordes while battling opponents. Others despised it, claiming it broke the competitive flow. Fortnite was no stranger to debate, but the Ice King's zombies sparked one of its fiercest. Still, no one could deny the spectacle. Season 7 proved once again that Fortnite was more than a battle royale, it was a living narrative. The Ice King wasn't just a skin, he was a force who left his mark on the map itself. The frozen wasteland he conjured would define the season, shaping every drop, every firefight, every match. The island had survived comets, rifts, and cubes. Now it faced its harshest trial yet, a winter without end. The snow fell quietly at first. It covered the trees in a powdery frost, dusted the rooftops of Pleasant Park, and blanketed the mountains in pale white. To new players, it felt like a seasonal flourish, a festive holiday touch. But veterans of the island knew better. Nothing in Fortnite happened without purpose. The iceberg that had collided with the map wasn't just terrain, it was a fortress. Perched on its cliff stood the Ice King's castle, an ominous structure of stone and frost, its spires reaching skyward like jagged teeth. Inside, players explored vaulted halls and frozen chambers, searching for clues. Who was this King of Winter? Why had he come? And what was he planning for the island? The community erupted with theories. Some saw the Ice King as the island's first true big bad, a villain with the power to reshape the world itself. Others speculated that he was a guardian, holding back some greater evil lurking beneath the ice. The strange runes carved into the snowy landscape seemed to hint at forces older than even the Visitor or the Cube. And then there were the whispers of an elemental war. If the Ice King had arrived with snow and storms, what might come next? Fire? Earth? Lightning? Fans began crafting elaborate timelines, imagining rival monarchs battling for control of the island. Theories about a Fire King spread through Reddit like wildfire. Meanwhile, the atmosphere of the island had changed. Snow muffled footsteps, turning matches into eerie hunts across frozen terrain. The blizzards reduced visibility, making combat feel tense and unpredictable. Planes roared overhead, their EN. Battlefield, it felt like a kingdom under siege. For the first time, the player base was split not just over mechanics, but over tone. Some embraced the winter's bite, calling the snowy landscape Fortnite's most beautiful transformation yet. Others felt stifled by the ice, weary of the constant chill. Yet whether they loved it or hated it, everyone agreed, the Ice King had made his presence known. And with his arrival came a question that hung in the frosted air: if the Ice King could blanket the island in snow, what else was possible? What other powers slumbered beyond the horizon, waiting to claim the island for themselves? The snow had fallen, but it carried more than cold. It carried foreshadowing. The island was no longer just alive, it was contested. Season 7 was Fortnite at its most ambitious. The iceberg collision, the arrival of the Ice King, the frozen biome stretching across a third of the map, it was grand, cinematic, and unforgettable. But with ambition came controversy, and the community's reaction to this winter's reign was as icy as the island itself. At first, the snow was enchanting. Dropping into frosty flights or Polar Peak felt like stepping into another world. Players admired the castles, slid through icy slopes, and marveled at how completely the island had been reshaped. For weeks, every match carried the novelty of exploration, the joy of finding new places to build, fight, and hide. The winter wonderland was Fortnite at its most visually breathtaking. But novelty quickly gave way to division. The introduction of the X for Stormwing planes was the season's boldest and most divisive innovation. For some, they were exhilarating. Aerial dogfights tore across the skies, entire squads opening fire from above, diving and swooping like heroes in an action film. Clips of impossible mid-air eliminations flooded YouTube, and players reveled in the chaos of building towers one moment and launching dogfights the next. For others, the planes were a nightmare. Critics argued they broke the balance of the game, giving players too much mobility and firepower. A skilled squad in Stormwings could dominate an entire lobby, raining down destruction with little counterplay. Forums lit up with angry debates. Planes ruined Fortnite versus Learn to Adapt. Season 7 had sparked a cultural fault line within the community, a split that would define conversations for months. The Ice King's grand event, covering the island in snow, brought another controversy. Along with the blizzard came the return of zombies, this time reimagined as icy husks that spawned across the map. To some, the creatures were a fun curveball, adding chaos and unpredictability to fights. They made matches feel alive, enemies lurking even when the map seemed quiet. But many despised them. Competitive players in particular claimed the zombies disrupted the core battle royale loop, turning tense one-on-one encounters into messy third-party disasters. Complaints piled up, zombies dropping loot too generously, interrupting builds, overwhelming players who just wanted to focus on the storm and their opponents. For every fan who loved the spectacle, there was another who groaned when the husks shambled out of the ice. And yet, despite the debates, Fortnite thrived. The controversies only fueled conversation, keeping the game at the center of cultural discourse. Every new patch sparked fresh arguments, every change dissected by YouTubers and streamers. Was Fortnite losing its competitive edge, or was it embracing its identity as a chaotic sandbox of fun? The answer depended on who you asked. Outside of the arguments, one thing was undeniable: Fortnite had never been bigger. Streamers continued to break records, esports tournaments began to take shape, and the player base remained massive. Whether you loved the planes, hated the zombies, or simply enjoyed building snow forts with friends, Fortnite was everywhere. Season 7 proved that Fortnite wasn't afraid to take risks. It experimented boldly, even recklessly, knowing it might anger some but excite others. And in doing so, it reminded everyone of a simple truth: the island was never meant to be stable. It was meant to be alive. The Ice King's reign had blanketed the map, divided the community, and expanded the game's identity. Some players longed for simpler times. Others embraced the chaos. But all of them, whether in the skies, the snow, or the storm, were part of the same frost-bitten world. The island had endured the long winter. Snow blanketed every field, the Ice King ruled from his frozen throne, and players had grown accustomed to the chill of Season 7. But even as the snow settled, whispers spread: winter could not last forever. Something beneath the surface was stirring, hotter, angrier, older. Season 8 began not with a storm, but with a volcano. In March 2019, the ground itself tore open. Molten fire spewed from the earth, reshaping the island with a fiery vengeance. The southeastern coast cracked wide, birthing a jagged landscape of lava flows, smoldering craters, and the looming peak of an active volcano. Where the Ice King had blanketed the land in cold, his rival had risen in flame. The Fire King, known as the Prisoner, was unlike any villain Fortnite had introduced before. Unlike the Visitor or the Ice King, players didn't simply unlock him through a battle pass. Instead, he was discovered. Trapped beneath Polar Peak's ice at the start of Season 7, his chained form had been a mystery. Week by week, players watched as the ice melted and his shackles broke. By the time Season 8 arrived, he was free and furious. The prisoner's skin evolved as players completed his challenges, flames slowly spreading across his body until he became a figure of molten fury. His story wasn't told in trailers alone, it was lived, quest by quest, by millions of players unlocking his final form. the island had witnessed the rise of its second elemental king, and his wrath burned across the map. The volcano wasn't just decoration. Lava flows carved new paths through the island, deadly hazards that forced players to adapt. Step into the molten rivers and you were instantly burned. Battles near the volcano's base became frantic, with players risking elimination by missteps into the fiery streams. And perched at the crater's edge stood the ominous hulk of the Fire King's throne, a reminder of who had claimed the island from the cold. But the destruction didn't stop there. As the season unfolded, the volcano erupted with devastating force. Pillars of flame shot into the sky, raining molten destruction on the island's most beloved locations. Tilted Towers and Retail Row, two staples of Fortnite since the beginning, were obliterated in an instant. Buildings crumbled, entire blocks reduced to ash. For many players, it was the death of an era. Tilted, once thought indestructible, had finally fallen. The event left the community reeling. Some celebrated the boldness. Fortnite had once again proven it was willing to destroy its own landmarks to tell a story. Others mourned. Tilted had been the heart of Fortnite's chaos, the proving ground for streamers, the favorite drop for countless players. Now it was a smoking ruin, and memes of theft for Tilted flooded social media. Retail Row, too, became a casualty of the Fire King's wrath, and the loss left players shaken. But if the destruction was painful, it was also exhilarating. Fortnite was no longer just introducing new locations, it was erasing old ones. The game was alive, unpredictable, and willing to tear down its own history to make room for the future. Season 8 wasn't only about destruction. It was about change, and about proving that nothing on the island was safe. The comet had brought fear, the rocket had brought awe, the cube had brought mystery, and the Ice King had brought conquest. But the Fire King, the prisoner, brought chaos. He didn't just alter the island. He scarred it. The rise of the Fire King marked the end of innocence for Fortnite. The island was no longer a playground for experiments. It was a battlefield between forces greater than the players themselves. And as the volcano roared, the community realized a new truth: Fortnite's story wasn't just evolving, it was erupting. By the time the volcano erupted, Fortnite was no longer just a game. It was a cultural juggernaut. What began as a quirky experiment in late 2017 had become, by 2019, a worldwide obsession. Fortnite wasn't only topping charts. It was rewriting the rules of gaming. Esports tournaments were drawing million-dollar prize pools. Streamers were securing celebrity status, crossing into mainstream television and music. Brands that once ignored video games were now scrambling to partner with Fortnite, from Marvel superheroes appearing in the game to global sports leagues dropping limited-time skins. The numbers were staggering. Fortnite boasted hundreds of millions of players worldwide, with concurrent player counts breaking records during live events. Twitch and YouTube were dominated by Fortnite content, clips of trick shots and chaotic matches circulating through every corner of social media. Even those who never touched a controller knew what Fortnite was. It had entered the cultural lexicon, from school hallways to late-night talk shows. And yet, for all its mainstream success, Fortnite remained rooted in its player-driven chaos. It was unpredictable, alive, and constantly changing. A game where you could build a fortress, wield a rocket launcher, dance on a volcano, and then be eliminated by a teenager halfway across the world, all within minutes. That chaos was its magic. Season 8 showcased just how fearless Epic Games had become. Destroying Tilted Towers and Retail Row wasn't just an in-game event, it was a declaration. Fortnite wasn't afraid to burn down its own history, to shock its community, and to move forward with no guarantees of what would come next. It was bold game design, but also bold storytelling, merging lore with gameplay in a way no one else in the industry had attempted at such scale. The Fire King's rise marked more than just a narrative twist. It symbolized Fortnite's evolution from phenomenon to mythology. The island was no longer just a backdrop, it was a stage for elemental wars, cosmic intrusions, and player-driven history. Every season led new meaning onto the map, and every update kept the community guessing. Yet with every rise came division. Some players loved the constant reinvention, others missed the simplicity of earlier days. Complaints about planes, zombies, and now even lava poured across Reddit and Twitter. But that was Fortnite's paradox. Even those who criticized it couldn't stop talking about it, couldn't stop logging in to see what would happen next. By early 2019, Fortnite wasn't merely leading the battle royale genre. It had become the face of gaming itself, loved, hated, debated, and imitated worldwide. The island was on fire, both literally and figuratively, and the players were along for the ride. The island had seen meteors fall, rockets tear holes in the sky, and cubes roll across the land. But nothing had hit harder, emotionally, than the eruption of Season 8. The Fire King's volcano didn't just reshape the island. It obliterated history. In one fiery blast, Tilted Towers, the crown jewel of Fortnite's chaos, was reduced to rubble. The skyscrapers that once stood as monuments of competition crumbled into ash. Players who had dropped there thousands of times, who had memorized every chest spawn, every rooftop angle, every desperate escape route, logged in to find their beloved city gone. Tilted wasn't just a location. It was an identity. It was where legends were made, where streamers proved their skill, where every player at some point tested themselves against the storm of enemies flooding its streets. Now, it was a smoking ruin. Retail Row, too, fell victim to the eruption. A humble but beloved shopping district, Retail had been a favorite drop since Season 1. The grocery aisles, the houses on the outskirts, the frantic early battles, all turned to cinders. Players remembered their first wins there, their last-minute survivals, their goofy dances in its parking lots. Losing Retail was like losing a piece of Fortnite's soul. The community reaction was instant and overwhelming. Reddit threads filled with F in the chat tributes. YouTube creators released montages of Tilted's greatest moments set to dramatic music, as if memorializing a fallen hero. Streamers held mock funerals, dropping into the ruined remains to say goodbye one last time. Memes circulated endlessly. Tilted's destruction became both a heartbreak and a rallying cry, a shared experience that united millions. For many, this was the first time Fortnite had truly felt like it was taking something away. New points of interest had always been added, but this was erasure, a rewriting of memory. It was thrilling, yes, but also painful. Epic Games had drawn a line, nothing on the island was sacred. And yet, in that pain, something beautiful happened. The community came together like never before. Players swapped stories of their favorite Tilted drops, their craziest Retail victories, their funniest fails. Tilted became more than a map location. It became a shared nostalgia, a myth woven into the Fortnite saga. The eruption also sparked a new wave of theories. If Tilted could fall, what else wasn't safe? Could Pleasant Park vanish? Could the entire island be destroyed? Players began to speculate that Fortnite was hurtling toward something bigger, an endgame that none of them could quite predict. The destruction of Tilted and Retail was more than just an update. It was a cultural moment. Fortnite wasn't just a game you played, it was a game you lived. Millions around the world experienced the same shock, the same disbelief, the same rush of emotions all at once. That collective eruption of the fanbase echoed louder than the volcano itself. Season 8 proved that Fortnite could break hearts as well as blow minds. The Fire King had left his scar, and in that scar, a new truth burned. Fortnite wasn't just evolving, it was rewriting itself, one fiery eruption at a time. When the dust settled from Season 8's eruption, the island stood scarred. Tilted Towers and Retail Row lay in ruins, smoking reminders of Fortnite's willingness to rewrite its own history. For weeks, players dropped into the cratered remains, paying homage to the past and wondering what could possibly come next. Season 9 gave them the answer, a leap into the future. Neo Tilted, the city reborn. From the ashes of Tilted Towers rose Neo Tilted, a glittering futuristic metropolis. Towering skyscrapers gleamed with neon lights, holographic billboards buzzed, and slipstreams, wind tunnels of high-tech transportation, spiraled through the air. The skyline that once symbolized pure chaos was now transformed into a sci-fi wonderland. At first, it felt alien. Players who once knew Tilted inside and out found themselves lost in its vertical mazes, disoriented by slipstream movement, and surprised by the new sightlines. Some loved the sleek redesign, calling it a bold evolution of a classic location. Others missed the gritty, rough around the edges chaos of old Tilted. Neo Tilted wasn't the Tilted of memory, it was a reinvention, shiny and futuristic, a symbol of Fortnite's commitment to change. But whether loved or hated, it was undeniably alive. Every drop into Neo Tilted was an adventure, every rooftop a chance at victory or disaster. It was a statement, the island would not stay stuck in the past. Mega Mall, a consumer paradise. Retail Row, too, was reborn, not as a small suburban district, but as the sprawling Mega Mall. Brightly lit corridors stretched across multiple floors, escalators buzzed, and shopping carts became relics of a bygone age. Mega Mall was Retail Row on steroids, louder, bigger, more extravagant. The fan base's reaction mirrored that of Neo Tilted, mixed, but fascinated. For some, Mega Mall represented the joy of Fortnite's absurdity, a shopping center where firefights broke out in food courts. For others, it felt too far removed from the charm of the original retail. But one thing was certain, it brought fresh energy to the island, a new place for stories to unfold. The Zero Point and a looming threat. Yet beneath the neon glow and commercial sprawl, a darker story pulsed. At the heart of Neo Tilted, a crackling orb of unstable energy throbbed, the Zero Point. First hinted at in past seasons, it now became central to Fortnite's unfolding narrative. The Zero Point wasn't just a map feature, it was a mystery. A swirling singularity of raw power, it seemed to hold the fate of the island itself. Players couldn't interact with it yet, but its ominous presence fueled endless speculation. Was it a portal? A weapon? The source of Fortnite's ever-shifting reality? Data miners unearthed files hinting at catastrophic instability. YouTubers made hour-long theory videos connecting it to the Visitor, the Cube, and the Comet. The community buzzed with speculation that the Zero Point wasn't just part of the background, it was the fuse on a ticking time bomb. A future uncertain. Season 9 marked a turning point. It wasn't about fire and destruction anymore, it was about rebirth and reinvention. The island had taken its first steps into a futuristic identity, a new stage for players to explore. But that progress came with tension. Beneath the holograms and neon, something dangerous was building. The volcano had destroyed the past. The Zero Point threatened to unravel the future. For longtime players, Season 9 was more than just another update, it was a shock to the system. The Fortnite island had always been evolving, but Neo Tilted and Mega Mall felt like something different altogether. The past wasn't just altered, it was rewritten, paved over with chrome, neon, and sci-fi aesthetics. A divided community. The debate over old versus new raged across social media. Nostalgic fans posted screenshots of classic Tilted Towers and Retail Row, arguing that Epic had stripped away the heart of Fortnite's most iconic locations. Others embraced the change, pointing out that the game had always been about forward momentum. Why cling to the past when the future was so bold, so fresh, so alive? This divide created a cultural moment in the community. Fortnite wasn't just updating, it was challenging its players. It asked them to adapt, to relearn, to embrace change even when it meant letting go of something beloved. For some, that was exhilarating. For others, it was alienating. Streamers reflected this divide too. Some mourned Tilted as a never the same, while others thrived in the fast-paced chaos of Neo Tilted slipstreams and sightlines. YouTube titles read like obituaries. Goodbye Tilted Towers alongside Why Neo Tilted is the best POI ever. The 0 Point obsession. At the center of it all was the 0 Point. Even though it sat silently inside Neo Tilted, its crackling energy and pulsating glow captured everyone's imagination. Some players ignored the fights around them just to watch it. Clips circulated of people role-playing, gathering in groups around the orb as if it were sacred. Theories spread like wildfire. Was the 0 Point the reason the island kept changing? Was it linked to the Visitor's rocket and the comet from Season 3? Was Epic building toward something bigger than just seasonal updates, a true saga that tied everything together? For the first time, players began to realize that Fortnite wasn't just tossing out random ideas each season. There was a thread, a deeper story. Theories connected Kevin the Cube to the 0 Point, the rocket to the rifts, and Fortnite as a global phenomenon. By this time, Fortnite had become more than a game. It was a cultural juggernaut. Streamers on Twitch still drew millions of viewers. Kids wore Fortnite shirts to school. Professional athletes and celebrities performed Fortnite dances on live television. The game had leapt from screens into mainstream life, a symbol of the late 2010s gaming culture. And Season 9, with its futuristic redesigns and sci-fi elements, only amplified that cultural energy. It wasn't just about dropping into a battle royale anymore, it was about being part of an unfolding story that the whole world was watching. Foreshadowing what's to come. Season 9 felt shiny, playful, and forward-looking on the surface. But the closer players looked, the more ominous it became. The 0 Point wasn't stable. Its glow wasn't steady, it pulsed, cracked, and hummed with strange energy. For the fans paying attention, there was no doubt this wasn't just decoration. Something was coming. Something big. And when it arrived, it wouldn't just change the island, it would change Fortnite forever. By the middle of Season 9, the tension surrounding the 0 Point had reached a fever pitch. Players had grown used to the strange hum of the orb in Neo Tilted, but its instability was undeniable. It wasn't just scenery anymore, it was alive, breathing, pulsing, threatening. Theories spread daily about what it could unleash. The answer came in a form no one expected, a monster. The first hint appeared when part of the ice near Polar Peak cracked and shifted. Players noticed something massive moving beneath the surface, like a creature trapped in hibernation. Days later, it broke free. The event wasn't cinematic or scripted at first, it was environmental. A footprint appeared near Snobby Shores, then another closer to Loot Lake. Giant bones scattered in the open. Suddenly, the island felt like it belonged not just to players, but to something else, something ancient. People began calling it Yucatas, short for catastrophe. The beast had no clear form at first, only clues, but the dread it inspired was immediate. Epic, in their usual fashion, built suspense. While the monster roamed unseen, construction began in the ocean near Pressure Plant. Week by week, scaffolding rose until its shape became undeniable, a massive mech. Its scale dwarfed everything else on the island. Brightly colored and adorned with goofy cosmetic details, it looked almost playful at first glance. Yet the longer players watched it being built, the more obvious it became, this wasn't decoration. This was preparation for war. By the time the live event was scheduled, the island felt like a stage waiting for its climax. On the day itself, millions of players logged in at once, standing shoulder to shoulder with strangers in lobbies, waiting for something historic. And then it began. The ocean erupted, and from it rose the monster in full form, massive and terrifying, a beast of bone and scales. At the same moment, the mech launched from its platform, a shining titan prepared for battle. What followed was pure spectacle. The two clashed across the island, their fight shaking the map itself. Players watched helplessly as Tilted, Loot Lake, and other landmarks were caught in the chaos. The mech fired missiles, the monster struck with brute force, and the 0 point pulsed violently as if it too were caught in the struggle. At one point, the mech seemed defeated, collapsed, and vulnerable, but then it did something no one could have predicted. It pulled a sword from beneath Neo, tilted, disguised as a statue all along, and with one massive swing, it impaled the beast through the chest. The monster fell. The mech stood victorious, posing dramatically before blasting into the sky and leaving the island behind. It was equal parts thrilling and absurd, a mix of Saturday morning cartoon and summer blockbuster, all unfolding live inside a video game. Players couldn't believe what they had just witnessed. This wasn't just an event, it was cinema. In the aftermath, the battlefield bore scars, and the 0 point, once again, looked unstable. But the community wasn't focused on the map changes in that moment. The only thing anyone could talk about was the sheer audacity of what Epic had pulled off. Clips spread everywhere: YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, even mainstream news outlets. Fortnite had just delivered one of the most ambitious live events in gaming history, and millions had watched it unfold in real time. For players, it felt like confirmation of what they had long suspected: Fortnite wasn't just a battle royale anymore. It was a living story, a place where the impossible could happen, where myth and spectacle collided. The mecha versus monster fight was more than just an event, it was a promise. The game could take them anywhere. As Season X began, there was a sense that the island itself was breaking under the weight of its own history. The 0 point, weakened and unstable after the clash between the monster and the mech, now floated exposed above Loot Lake. Its violent pulses tore open rifts in reality, bending time and memory. The island was no longer moving forward, it was unraveling. Players dropping into Season X immediately noticed that the map felt both familiar and strange. Locations thought long gone were suddenly back, but not as they had once been. Dusty Depot returned, its warehouses restored as though the comet had never hit, but with fragments of modern chaos surrounding it. Tilted Towers reappeared in the form of Tilted Town, locked in a strange temporal bubble where building was impossible and the aesthetic matched an old Wild West frontier. Each update brought more of these fractured versions of history, as if the island was a scrapbook of Fortnite's past, being torn apart and reassembled by forces beyond control. The return of these places sparked a surge of nostalgia. Veterans who had been there since the early days felt a rush of excitement revisiting Dusty, retail, and other landmarks that had defined their first matches. But nostalgia came with unease. This wasn't the comforting return of old favorites, it was a warning. The world of Fortnite was collapsing inward, blending timelines in chaotic ways. The game had always been about change, but now the changes carried the weight of finality. It felt like an ending was near. The community responded with a mixture of joy and anxiety. Memes and YouTube videos celebrated the return of beloved Poise, while streamers speculated endlessly about what it all meant. Theories tied everything back to the Visitor, the enigmatic figure who had first launched the rocket back in Season 4. Was he trying to fix the 0 point? Or was he accelerating its collapse? The narrative threads that had stretched across multiple seasons were starting to weave together, and players could feel the story coiling toward something massive. The gameplay of Season X itself mirrored this chaos. The introduction of the brute mechs created controversy, with their overpowered rockets and stomp attacks dominating matches. For some, they added spectacle and fit perfectly into the season's theme of larger-than-life destruction. For others, they were a breaking point, sparking frustration and fueling debates about whether Fortnite was losing sight of its competitive balance. Once again, the community's divided reaction became part of the season's identity, another reflection of the game's unpredictable nature. Through it all, the 0 point continued to pulse. Strange objects materialized, timelines shifted, and the island felt more unstable with each passing day. Epic was building tension the same way they always did, slowly, deliberately, making the players live inside the unraveling story. It was as though every battle, every drop, every match was happening in a world standing on the edge of collapse. Season X wasn't about introducing something new, it was about looking back. It was a season built on memory, a living museum of everything Fortnite had been since its launch. But the way those memories fractured and warped made it clear that the past was colliding with the present, and the result wouldn't be sustainable. Players didn't just expect an ending, they could feel it coming. The game had trained them to know when something big was about to break, and now all signs pointed to the 0 point itself. And so, with every match played, with every warehouse visited in Dusty Depot or duel fought in Tilted Town, players waited for the inevitable. Fortnite had reached a moment where the only way forward was to tear everything down. By the time Season X reached its midpoint, Fortnite was no longer just a game, it was a cultural juggernaut that had reshaped the industry. What had started as a quirky free-to-play experiment in late 2017 had grown into a global phenomenon with hundreds of millions of players. Fortnite wasn't just being played, it was being lived. Kids wore Fortnite t-shirts to school, professional athletes celebrated touchdowns with Fortnite dances, and celebrities streamed matches with pro players. In just 2 years, Fortnite had transformed from a sleeper hit into the face of modern gaming. Yet behind the hype, there was an awareness that things were shifting. The community felt it. Season X didn't just bring nostalgia in the form of old locations returning. It brought with it an uneasy sense of reflection. For players who had been there since the beginning, logging into Dusty Depot felt like walking through a memory, one that was both comforting and disorienting. The map had become a living timeline, looping back on itself and folding its history into new shapes. It was as though Epic was asking players to look back and take stock of how far the game had come. The skin roster alone told a story of scale. Where once players had debated the novelty of a single night skin or a quirky astronaut, now the item shop boasted hundreds of cosmetics. Legendary skins, crossover events, and collaborations had become staples. Marvel heroes, NFL uniforms, pop stars, and original icons all stood shoulder to shoulder in Fortnite's growing multiverse. Owning certain skins had become a badge of honor, a marker of when you had joined the ride. Recon Expert, Renegade Raider, and Skull Trooper were no longer just cosmetics, they were cultural symbols. The game's identity was deeply tied to how players dressed their avatars, and entire social hierarchies emerged around it. On the competitive side, Fortnite had proven its legitimacy with the 2019 Fortnite World Cup. Tens of thousands gathered in Arthur Ashe Stadium in New York to watch players like Bugger ascend to esports superstardom, while millions more tuned in online. The sheer scale of it all was unprecedented for a game that was barely 2 years old. Fortnite had gone from living rooms and classrooms to the world's largest stages. But for all its triumphs, Fortnite was beginning to show the weight of its success. Controversies over balance, especially with the introduction of brute mechs, exposed the game's growing pains. The community was divided between casual players who embraced the chaos and competitive players who demanded tighter gameplay. Forums, Twitter, and YouTube were filled with debates, rants, and even protests. For the first time, Fortnite's unstoppable momentum felt like it might be slowing, even if only slightly. Still, none of this overshadowed the sense of anticipation that Season X cultivated. Epic Games had built a reputation for delivering the unexpected, and players were conditioned to expect an ending that would be bigger, louder, and more shocking than anything before. Every pulse of the 0 point was a reminder that the island story was heading toward something irreversible. As the final weeks of Season X ticked away, players weren't just wondering what the next update would bring, they were preparing for the end of an era. Fortnite had changed the way games told stories, the way communities formed around them, and the way the industry thought about live service models. It wasn't just that the game had grown, it was that it had defined a generation of gaming in real time. The calm before collapse was thick with nostalgia and anxiety. Players looked back on every comet, every cube, every live event that had shaken the island, and realized they were about to watch it all come crashing down. Chapter 1 was almost over. The question wasn't if something dramatic would happen. It was how far Epic was willing to go to reset the world they had built. The final days of Season X felt different. Players could sense it in the way the game carried itself. Every update, every unstable pulse of the 0 point, every glitch in reality was a reminder that something irreversible was looming. Fortnite had taught its community to pay attention, to notice the signs when the island was on the edge of catastrophe, and now those signs were everywhere. When the end event was announced, the name alone sent shockwaves through the community. The end. Not a tease, not a hint, an outright declaration. Players around the world cleared their schedules, logged in early, and waited by the 0 point at Loot Lake, where the event would unfold. Twitch streams broke viewer records, YouTube countdowns ran non-stop, and schoolyards buzzed with chatter. What's going to happen? When the timer struck 0, the visitors' rockets returned, streaking through the skies in a dazzling display. But this wasn't like the first rocket launch back in Season 4. This was chaos multiplied, multiple rockets converging, splitting, warping through rifts, then crashing together with violent precision. Each explosion felt like a piece of the island's history tearing loose. Players watched helplessly as the sky itself fractured, as reality folded in on itself. Then, the rocket struck the 0 point. The unstable sphere pulsed wildly, surging with uncontrollable energy. The island shook, and in one terrifying instant, the 0 point collapsed inward. A massive shockwave tore across the landscape, pulling everything, buildings, mountains, players themselves, toward its gravitational grip. The entire map, every landmark and memory, was ripped apart. And then, silence. The screen turned black, save for a swirling void in the center. A black hole. No map, no menus, no escape. Players couldn't even return to the lobby. For hours, then days, the game existed only as a live stream of that ominous singularity. Millions tuned in, hypnotized by nothingness. Epic had done something no one else had dared. They had turned their game off in the most dramatic way possible. The community's reaction bordered on hysteria. Twitter exploded with memes, despair, and wild theories. Kids asked their parents if Fortnite was gone forever. Streamers sat stunned, staring at the void, trying to entertain audiences with speculation when there was nothing left to play. Some believed the game was over, that Epic had truly ended it. Others dug into the code, uncovering hidden numbers and messages, convinced that there were clues buried in the darkness. Fortnite wasn't just offline, it was an unsolvable mystery shared by millions. For nearly 2 days, the black hole held. It was more than downtime, it was performance art. Epic had taken the most popular game in the world and staged a global spectacle of absence. It was bold, it was maddening, and it was unforgettable. Every player, whether casual or hardcore, knew they were witnessing gaming history. When the black hole finally gave way to a new trailer and a fresh island, the world realized what had just happened. Fortnite hadn't ended. Chapter 1 had ended. In its place was a new beginning, a Chapter 2, with a brand new map, a clean slate, and a promise that the saga would continue. The black hole wasn't just the end of a chapter, it was the moment Fortnite proved it could do more than surprise. It could stop the world in its tracks, rewrite the rules of what a live game could be, and make silence louder than any explosion. Chapter 1 was over. But Fortnite was far from finished. The black hole was more than just an in-game event. It was a cultural moment unlike anything gaming had ever seen. For millions of players, it was the first time a digital world they visited every day simply ceased to exist. No maps, no menus, no matches, only a cold, swirling void suspended in silence. When the collapse struck, the first reaction was shock. Streams cut to black. Kids and teenagers stared at their screens, unsure if the game had crashed or if this was intentional. Slowly, the realization spread, this was all part of the plan. Epic hadn't glitched. They had chosen to shut the door on their world. The black hole was hypnotic. It pulsed gently, its edges warping with faint rings of light, pulling players in with the same gravity that had consumed the island. The more people stared, the more unsettling it became. This wasn't a lobby screen. It wasn't a cut scene. It was nothingness. And it lingered. For hours, streams around the world showed the same image. Ninja, Tfue, Tim the Tatman. Every creator had their audience glued to a void. Memes flooded Twitter. "My son has been staring at this for 3 hours," one parent wrote. Others joked that Epic had pulled off the boldest server maintenance in history. But beneath the humor was a collective unease. Was Fortnite actually gone? Theories spread like wildfire. Some claimed the numbers flashing faintly across the screen were a secret code. Others believed the black hole was a wormhole to a new reality. YouTubers pored over every detail, dissecting pixels as though they were sacred texts. The community became detectives, not players, united by the mystery of the void. The sheer scale of attention was staggering. Twitch reached record highs as millions tuned in not to watch gameplay, but to watch nothing happen. Mainstream media outlets covered it like a global event. Fortnite has disappeared into a black hole. For a brief moment, the world outside gaming took notice of how powerful this digital universe had become. For players, though, the black hole carried a strange weight. It felt like a funeral. The island, with all its places, tilted towers, dusty depot, loot lake, had been erased. Those memories weren't just gone, they had been swallowed whole. It was the rare moment when a game made players feel the fragility of its world. Everything they had taken for granted could vanish in an instant. And yet, it wasn't despair alone. The black hole held promise. It was a reset, a clean slate. Just as the void swallowed the past, it teased the possibility of something larger on the horizon. It was terrifying and exciting at once, a liminal space between chapters, between endings and beginnings. By the time the void finally broke, when a new island emerged and players dropped into Chapter 2 for the first time, the black hole had already left its mark. It had proven that absence could be as powerful as action, that silence could speak louder than sound, and that a game could stop the world simply by refusing to exist. The black hole was more than downtime. It was the moment Fortnite declared that it wasn't just another video game. It was a living, breathing phenomenon, capable of holding millions in suspense with nothing but darkness. Fortnite Chapter 1 was more than just the beginning of a game. It was the beginning of a movement. What started in late 2017 as a curious experiment, a free battle royale spin-off from a struggling survival game, quickly evolved into a cultural phenomenon that reshaped gaming, streaming, and pop culture itself. Over 10 seasons, players watched the island transform from a quiet, unassuming battleground into a living, breathing world of MYST. Conno Eruption, the Mecha vs. Monster Showdown, and finally, the Black Hole. All of these weren't just moments in a game. They were shared experiences that brought millions together in real time. No other game had blurred the line between storytelling and community participation quite like Fortnite. Players weren't just watching a narrative unfold, they were inside it, shaping it, reacting to it, living it. The world wasn't static, it was alive, unpredictable, and always on the brink of something bigger. Fortnite became more than a place to play, it became a stage, a conversation, a global social space. The community itself was as much a part of the saga as the events. Theories about tilted towers, memes about bush campers, debates about skins, controversies over balance changes, the endless stream of content from YouTube and Twitch, these weren't side effects, they were part of the experience. Fortnite thrived because its players didn't just consume the game, they helped write its story. By the time Chapter 1 ended in October 2019, Fortnite was no longer just a hit game. It was a cultural juggernaut. It had been featured in classrooms, on talk shows, in mainstream headlines. It hosted virtual concerts, brought Marvel superheroes and NFL players into the mix, and created a common language spoken by kids, streamers, celebrities, and athletes alike. The Black Hole, closing Chapter 1, was the perfect metaphor. Fortnite had erased everything it had built over 2 years, not as an ending, but as proof that nothing in this world was permanent, and that every ending could be a new beginning. The island was gone, but the legacy of Chapter 1 was permanent. Fortnite had shown the world that video games could be more than games. They could be living stories. They could be global events. They could unite millions of people in anticipation, in laughter, in awe, even in silence. Chapter 1 was over. Its legacy would remain, not only in the memories of those who dropped into Tilted Towers or watched Kevin roll across the island, but in the way it changed the industry forever. Fortnite redefined what it meant to be a live game. It set a new standard for how a digital world could evolve, and how a community could be both its audience and its authors. As Chapter 2 began, one thing was clear: this was not the end. This was the beginning of something bigger. The beginning of a legacy that would continue to expand, to surprise, and to shape gaming culture for years to come. When Fortnite Chapter 1 began in September 2017, the island was small, quiet, and simple. There were no live events, no elaborate lore, no cinematic crossovers, just a handful of landmarks, a basic arsenal of weapons, and players experimenting with a quirky new Battle Royale mode. By October 2019, that same game had transformed into a cultural titan, with a narrative that spanned dimensions, an island that never stopped changing, and a community that had grown into one of the largest in gaming history. Looking back, the evolution across the 10 seasons wasn't just dramatic, it was historic. Season 1 was bare bones but pure, with an unshaped map and a player base just discovering what Fortnite was. By Season 2, the first Battle Pass and medieval theme showed a glimpse of ambition. This wasn't just another shooter, it was a living game that would constantly reinvent itself. Season 3 brought the comet, and with it, the first sense that the island was more than a backdrop, it was a character, one with secrets, foreshadowing, and impending change. By Season 4, Fortnite had rewritten the rules. The comet struck, Dusty Divot was born, and the idea of in-game storytelling took hold. It was no longer a game you played between matches. It was a saga you followed, with lore, heroes, and villains. Season 5 expanded the scope, pulling in different worlds through rifts and testing how far Fortnite could stretch its reality. Season 6 doubled down with Kevin the Cube, the Butterfly event, and the first truly mind-bending, communal live spectacle. Season 7 and Season 8 raised the stakes. The Ice King and the Prisoner fought for elemental control, snow blanketed the island, a volcano rose and erupted, and Tilted Towers was destroyed. Fortnite had moved far beyond its humble beginnings, it was now staging events that rivaled blockbuster movies, all unfolding in real time for millions of players. Season 9 leaned into futurism, transforming Tilted into Neo-Tilted and staging the unforgettable Mecha vs. Monster Showdown, an event that felt less like a game and more like a global premiere. And then came Season X, the chaotic finale, where time fractured, old landmarks returned, and Fortnite prepared to erase everything with the black hole. Comparing the first drop from the battle bus in Season 1 to the final moments of Chapter 1 is like comparing a spark to a wildfire. The game grew from a curious experiment into a phenomenon that defined an era of gaming. The player base swelled from a few million to hundreds of millions worldwide. The map evolved from static scenery into a dynamic stage. The events grew from whispered teasers in the sky to earth-shaking finales that stopped the world in its tracks. Every season added a new layer, a new memory, a new piece of shared history. Double-pump debates in Season 1, the hype over the first Battle Pass in Season 2, the comet speculation in Season 3, Kevin's mystery in Season 6, Tilted's destruction in Season 8, the Mecha vs. Monster in Season 9, and finally, the silence of the black hole in Season X. Each step built upon the last, creating a decade's worth of gaming milestones in just 2 years. Fortnite Chapter 1 wasn't just growth, it was acceleration. No game before it had changed so much, so fast, with such a massive, global audience along for the ride. From a small, chaotic drop on an unpolished island to one of the most spectacular endings in video game history, the journey of these 10 seasons redefined what was possible. The black hole wasn't just the end of a chapter. It was the punctuation mark on one of the most remarkable transformations gaming had ever seen. When the black hole swallowed Fortnite on October 13, 2019, the world stopped to watch. For nearly 2 days, millions of players, streamers, and fans stared at nothingness. The island was gone. The battle bus was gone. The game itself was unplayable. Yet in that void, Fortnite reached its loudest moment. Twitch shattered viewership records, Twitter and Reddit exploded with speculation, and news outlets around the globe reported on a video game that had seemingly erased itself. No ending had ever been so bold. But of course, it wasn't truly the end. It was a beginning. Fortnite emerged from the black hole with Chapter 2, proving that the game wasn't just a series of seasons, but an ongoing saga, capable of reinventing itself over and over again. New maps, new mechanics, new crossovers, and even bigger events would follow. The concerts with Marshmello and Travis Scott, the Avengers and Star Wars tie-ins, the Ariana Grande Rift Tour, these weren't just gaming moments, but cultural milestones, bridging entertainment and interactive media in ways that had never been attempted before. The legacy of Chapter 1, however, is irreplaceable. It was the foundation. It was discovery, growth, experimentation, and escalation all compressed into 2 whirlwind years. Players watched as the island evolved before their eyes, learned that a live service game could tell a story without cutscenes, and realized they were part of something larger than just a match-to-match shooter. Fortnite was no longer simply a game, it was a platform, a stage, a social space, a cultural phenomenon. From its modest launch in 2017 to its apocalyptic ending in 2019, Fortnite Chapter 1 did something few games had ever done: it changed the rules of the industry. It proved that games could be living worlds. It showed that storytelling could be dynamic, not static. And it created a community that wasn't just along for the ride, they were integral to it, speculating, theorizing, reacting, and keeping the energy alive season after season. The rise of Fortnite in Chapter 1 wasn't just about map changes or cosmetics. It was about the creation of a modern myth. Kevin the Cube, the Comet, the Visitor, the rocket launch, the butterfly, the Ice King, the volcano, the monster and the mecha, and finally, the black hole. These became shared memories, cultural touchstones, stories gamers would tell for years to come. And as Chapter 2 began, the sense was clear: Fortnite had not ended. It had only just begun. And that brings us to the end of Fortnite Chapter 1's incredible story. From the first drop onto that simple, unpolished island, all the way to the black hole that swallowed it whole, Fortnite gave us something unforgettable. Before you drift off completely, I want to share something with you. I have a dream: to build one of the most professional sleep story channels on YouTube. I imagine a place where the best stories are told in the most calming way, with incredible voice actors and production that feels like pure magic. A place where anyone can come, close their eyes, and escape into another world before sleep. But I can't do it alone. Every single subscriber helps me take one step closer to making that dream real. When you hit that subscribe button, you're not just supporting a channel, you're helping me build something that could one day become the go-to home for the best sleep stories on the internet. You're helping me create a space where millions can relax, rest, and dream. So, if you enjoyed tonight's story, I invite you to subscribe and join me on this journey. And when you wake up tomorrow, check out one of my favorite videos, Fall Asleep to Harry Potter's Diary. It's a magical story I think you'll love just as much. Thank you for listening, thank you for supporting, and thank you for being a part of this dream. Now, close your eyes, breathe deeply, and let your mind wander off into peaceful rest. Good night.